Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dean's Chat. My name is Dr. Jensen, and I'm your host. And it is an honor and a privilege to bring back our guest, Dr. Larry Harkless, for his part 2 interview. Larry, how you doing today?
I'm fine, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey, as promised, when we were ending our last episode, I was going to talk about a couple of your awards in education, and then I was wondering if you would kind of spend a few minutes talking about your philosophy of teaching residents. How's that sound?
Okay, sounds good. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's start with the first award, the Presidential Excellence in Teaching Award from the University of Texas. The American Diabetes Association also honored you with the Outstanding Education Award. You're on the Scientific Advisory Board for various entities, the CDC, Health and Human Services, VA, FDA, and you were the first chair for the ADA's Council of Foot Care. So Larry, I commend you on all of those awards. And what we're going to talk about the rest of this episode are your teaching philosophies. I was wondering if you could share with us, you taught so many residents over the years. Larry, what's your philosophy in getting the most out of a resident?
Well, it's basically simple. I think the big question is, what do you want them to know, and how do you know they learned? And then how do you remediate and enrich? So it's really those four pieces. So by me being an intern, I guess when I was in San Antonio, I rotated probably about 7 medical services because my year of training was primarily medicine, no surgery. Maybe I did 2 or 3 hammer toes the first year when I was at UT from 1975, 76. But rotating, I got to really see how each discipline structured their residency programs and how they, I guess, tried to hold everybody accountable for what I call one word, learning. And so most medical schools will have case conference, grand rounds, a combination of both every week, to hold everybody accountable for one word, learning. And so that's where students, residents, everybody's there learning in that environment. And they create what I call a culture of learning. So when I came back to work with the residents in 77, I would basically say I cared so much about what they knew that I had 7 venues where I tested their knowledge. And charity starts at home, and home is the clinic. And I think that that's an area where we suffer from in our profession. We do not have consistency of clinic. Everybody wants to do surgery. They run around an operating room. But I always raise the question, how do you know what the truth is in medicine? I asked that one day in Grand Rounds. And I think Michael Van Pelt, who's at UT Southwestern Orthopedics now, was one of the residents. So I asked him, how do you know what the truth is? And he didn't say anything. And I asked a fellow, and I think I asked a student. And then I asked him, how do you know whether the book is correct? And then they also looked at me, and I said, well, you don't believe any of that. You believe the patient. The patient is the truth. So the consistency of that, everybody want to go to the operating room and say, I did surgery. But if you don't do the pre, the intra, and the post-op care over the continuum, then you don't know what the truth is until you get in your own private practice, and you have to learn that in practice versus learning within the training program. And everybody wants the candy. I always say want the dessert before they get the meal. And so to me, the meal is the patient. It's seeing a volume of patients in a comprehensive setting like a county hospital. And I guess I've learned over the career that most medical schools are associated with the county hospital and the VA. Those are historically the fundamental structure for how all the training and the integration of all the disciplines and learning. And we are part of that clinically in certain situations, but we are not historically a part of the medical school. And I've learned that the differences in all of that, whether it's MD, DO, and podiatry, the MDs do all of it consistently through LCME, but they also have the hospitals, et cetera. We do not necessarily have the consistency of that. And so we need to improve in that. And so the biggest goal, I think, for everybody is to understand that and decide that that's important and just make it happen. Now, the other thing was that I think I talked about purpose-driven in the last discussion we had, dialogue. And my purpose was to earn the respect of all the disciplines and be treated similarly. So I had to be sure that the residents were learning and that they were growing and becoming better at what they were doing. And so that's all that process. And so I had three areas of training residents. The first is, can I trust you to get the information correctly? And I would tell them that. So if they're in clinic with me and I'm seeing 25, 30 patients a day, in 2 days, I can tell you whether I can trust them or not to get the information, because they're going to see 7, 8 patients every day or more. And then after that, can I trust you to do the exam well? And the last part is, do you know anything? Is the knowledge base. And so I always divide it into those particular segments in terms of teaching the residents. And every resident is different. You have to meet each resident where they are. We have strengths and weaknesses. And whatever I see, I admonish them in the things that they're good at, but I also would say, these are things you need to work on, blah, 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 blah. And once I see growth, then I approve them. And so I have a thing I call the 4 A's. Every person wants to be accepted, appreciated, affirmed, and approved. And you need to give that on a consistent basis in teaching people. And if you take the time to do that, I think they know that you care about them and you want them to learn. But everybody thinks you're picking on them when you ask them questions. But it's not about that. It's because I care and I want you to learn. And I want to make sure that you're where you need to be by the time you graduate. And everybody will get there over time. But everybody worries about comparing themselves to others. And I think that's the biggest issue. And so once you can get them to compare themselves to themselves, I think it's in Corinthians that those who compare themselves to themselves are not wise. That's in the Bible, really. In that. So that's kind of was my philosophy of teaching. And just rotating on those services, they use the Socratic method of teaching. And to me, that was the consistent part of all the different disciplines when I rotated as an intern. And also, when I got to Atlanta for surgery, Lou Pack was my program director, and he trained under Marvin Steinberg up at Jewish Memorial in New York. And Lou was really strong medicine-wise. And so I think I may have mentioned this, but he refined my thought process and taught me how to observe, even on a high level that I had my first year in San Antonio. So I continued to grow, although I went to Atlanta to learn surgery. I felt like Lou refined all of that with me that year.
That's great. I've heard.
And so probably just those things was the foundation for, I guess, for being a good educator. And I guess we're in the teaching award now. I think everybody, wants to earn the respect of their peers and others within the institutions where they're working. And so after I was there for quite a while, every year they would have the Presidential Teaching Awards. I would say, I think I'm good enough to win that award. I said it to myself, but I never said it to anybody else. And it was kind of interesting. In 1997, at one of our orthopedic department meetings, Dr. Heckman said nobody in the department had ever won the Presidential and Excellence Teaching Award. And so after that meeting, I said, well, maybe I should win the award. So I asked my chief resident one night about 2 a.m, did he think I was a good teacher? And he said, yeah, I think you're good. I said, do you think I'm good enough to win the Presidential and Excellence Teaching Award from your being around here for 3 years? He said, I think you're as good as anybody here. I said, well, nominate me then. And so that's basically how that happened. I never would have received the award, however, had it not been for a PhD nurse who was the director of research for the nursing school. Her name was Beverly Robinson. And I ran into her in the stairwell, and she had been a patient with some heel pain, but that's been a few years back. But she asked me how was I doing, and I told her I had been nominated for the award. And she was like a grandmother to me. She said, Larry, I won the award. You're going to win the award. Fill the darn paperwork out.
Oh, that's great.
A whole lot of paperwork. But we did that, and I won the award. And she sent me a personal note. And the note said, Larry, I knew you were a master teacher. Your students knew you were a master teacher. Now everybody know it. Congratulations. And that was it. That's the most significant note I've ever received.
Oh, that's fabulous.
From that. And so I think that was the foundation to, and the other issue was earning the respect of everybody within the Health Science Center. And so once that happened, nothing else needed to be said, because everybody in the Health Science Center knew. Because
Absolutely.
everybody gets the newsletter and all that. They know what's going on within the university, basically.
Larry, your training program and residency is legendary, right? The early mornings, the rounds. Didn't you have a acronym TLC that you spread to the residents? And
well, basically, every year, the first Monday in the new year, I would meet with the residents and say it's halftime. And this particular year, I asked the question, and it was silence. It didn't seem like there wasn't a lot of energy in the room, if you will. And so I asked them, were we winning the Super Bowl of podiatry? Because January is the Super Bowl. I said, are we winning the Super Bowl of podiatry? Are we losing? And nobody said anything. And finally, one of the interns in the back raised his hand. And he says, Dr. Harkless, I believe the game is tied. But that kind of threw me for a curve. And so I reached back there and said, well, if that's indeed the case, why is it tied? Why are we not winning? And then some energy came in there. So they got to talking. I went to the whiteboard. I wrote all this stuff up as we were talking. And then when we, toward the end, when I looked at the different things we had on the board, we ended up with 3 words: teamwork, leadership, consistency.
Teamwork, leadership, and consistency.
TLC, teamwork, leadership, consistency. So it's the consistency over time, that you grow and get better, and you have an excellent, team if everybody's working together. And then from that, I required that they turn in a 3x5 card every week. I met with the residents from 6 to 6:30 every morning. That was the gripe session. I had a thing called highs and lows. What was your high? What was your low? And if there were issues, concerns, then they had to have a solution, not just complaining. Yeah, so that's but that was 30 minutes before we started active rounds at 6:30. And then I told them that they had to have turn a 3x5 card every week on one thing they did last week to make the program better. And so that's kind of, how things evolved over time.
I like that. I think Dr. Rogers is, trying to carry on the legacy down at San Antonio right now. And he's the one who told me about the TLC.
Yeah. Well, he kept he added culture to that, which is fine. But I really believe that you have to have conference, as I mentioned, on a consistent basis to create the culture of learning. Because what we would do is start with the ingrown toenail and end up at the ankle. And if we did ingrown toenail, there were always 2 cases presented. And then you get to ask all the questions about whatever that is. And you get to see where people are, and they don't know who you're going to call on. I don't call on the same people every week, et cetera. But some of the people that needed more work, you may have called on them more, and they thought you may be picking on them, but I just wanted them to learn and grow. And that way, if they answer your questions, then that means that they can dialogue with any patient anywhere in the world, whether it was Harvard, Stanford, or whoever you talked about. Nobody was as smart as we were when we left conference every week on the topic. And then we had about a 10 or 12 minute lecture on the topic with the best evidence on that topic. And so I never worried about whether the residents would pass their boards or any of that, because if they showed up and participated at all, even just by osmosis, they probably were going to pass the board.
I love it. Larry,
and you had people that was well read. So I had to prepare and read as much, if not more than the residents, to be relevant every week. I call it, having that brings the 2 R's, the rigor and relevance, consistently to the educational process on a good basis. Yeah. And every department has that. Now, being in an academic institution where they participate in that every week, then when we have a neurology problem, a derm problem, a radiology problem, I just call one of the faculty up that's the expert in that area and say, I need you to show up for 7. Medicine people don't generally start at 8 o'clock. But nobody ever said no if I asked them to show up at 6:30, 7:15, 7 o'clock, whatever it was. They all came. Okay. And I think that created that culture where everybody was learning, because when you bring someone in that's the expert, they're going to know that, and then they're going to know the experts in their field, and then you're going to know who they are, where you can get their articles or call them up, talk to them, whatever that is. So I think that was the best part of all of that. And I would say that that's all I wanted for my profession, really. That's kind of the big picture to me. That's the bottom line, the basics of learning and growing. And if you do that, you'll earn the respect of everybody. Wherever you are working and training or delivering care, you'll earn their respect. That's how it works.
Absolutely. Larry, you trained so many residents that went on to become leaders in our profession. I was wondering if I could just bring up some names and you kind of reminisce about them and their career and how you've worked together. Do you mind doing that?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So the first name I'm going to bring up is Dr. Bob Freiberg, because he credits you with giving him the inquisitive academic mind. Your comments?
Well, Bob was a year behind me in school in San Francisco. He graduated 76, and I graduated in 1975. But Bob spent a month as a student when I was an intern here at UT, and our connection is that I think the only 2 or 3 hammer toes we did, he stole my hammer toe, tried to steal my hammer toe. So he loves to tell a story that I couldn't find the PIP joint. So, and I'm sure that's some truth to all of that. but we were, good friends from that. And then he trained up at New England Deaconess and Johnson up in Boston, which was, the mecca for diabetic foot. And so I basically told Bob that he needs to go to the ADA. Well, when we started the Foot Care Council, I had the diabetic foot and multidisciplinary approach was started by us in San Antonio in 1985. That was the first meeting. And to be successful, I thought we should have Wagner there. And Wagner was an orthopedic surgeon that didn't necessarily have a love for podiatry. But I wrote him many, many times before he actually agreed to come. But he did show up, and we earned his respect, et cetera. So at that meeting, Leon Briel, a colleague from Dallas, came up to me and said we should start a new society, and it should be called the American Society for Care of the Diabetic Foot. So he came to San Antonio this was December of '85. So in June of '86, he came to San Antonio and to talk about it. So we had dinner the night before, and then he came out to the Health Science Center the next day. And we decided we would have a meeting in December, and he said that I'd probably do something to academic people to get people to participate. So 23 people showed up at the AmFac Hotel at DFW, and Marv Levin, who wrote the first diabetic foot book out of Washington, St. Louis, Gary Gibbons, and one other person from the Jocelyn came, but it was about 23 people came. And Marv was on the board of the American Diabetes Association at that time, and he shared with us, informed us that they had councils. And although we had agreed to start the society, that we should ask the ADA, could we start a council? So he said he would seek that out, and probably right before Christmas, he called me and told me that the ADA agreed that we could have a council. However, we needed 200 signatures. And so I think I must have gotten 75 or 100 out of San Antonio. Now, I wasn't even a member of ADA. It was interesting. So we, by the middle of January, we had those signatures. I think he probably got the same number, about 100 out of St. Louis as well. And we attended the ADA's board meeting in March. They have a March board meeting. And they voted to have a council and basically told us we should have a scientific program. And Victor Roberts was an endocrinologist out of Dallas. And he also was involved with that. I think Lee Briel knew him too. And so he was a fellow with Andrew Bolton at the University of Miami. They were fellows together. And so he said that we should invite Bolton. I had no idea who Bolton, I mean, I'd read some of Bolton's stuff, but I really didn't, I hadn't connected all of that. So Bolton gave a speech. So we had a scientific program, and after we had to elect officers. And I moderate everything because I had written the letters to organize everything and, corresponding with the different, everybody that had participated. And so the plan was to get Lee Briel elected to the chair. So a guy named Chambers, who's an orthopedic surgeon out of USC and Rancho, nominated Wagner, and he was there. And Victor Roberts nominated Briel. And it was probably a good 400 or 500 people in this hall. And some guy in the back got up, and I recognized him. And he asked me, was I interested in being the chair? I told him I wasn't officially running, but if someone nominated me, and I got elected, I'd be happy to serve. So he nominated me
on the spot.
And I beat Wagner by 1 vote.
Oh, I love that. These are great stories, Larry.
Yeah. So that was the. At that point, I thought that was probably the most significant thing happened to our profession, because each member of the council was a member of the professional advisory panel for ADA, and they talked about the meetings, all of that, just people I've been reading about all my career, right, from an academic. And I do think that being in an academic environment, though, at the UT gives you credibility also that you don't have as it relates to the integration of medicine. You got to do the work now, but that helps a lot. But diabetes was different from the musculoskeletal aspect of orthopedics, because ortho was trying to control that, and they basically told them that that didn't exist as related to diabetes. You got to come on here and roll up your sleeves and do some damn work. Right. And so early on, they was trying to, come in and divide and conquer, whatever they were trying to do, but nobody wanted to do any work. So that all just kind of disbanded. It was amazing.
That's incredible. Let me bring up another name, Larry, Dr. Paul Brand and his influence on you.
Paul Brand, Dr. Joe Valenza is a colleague from Houston, and he and Dr. Bogie were contemporaries, who was my mentor too, who started everything in San Antonio. And Dr. Valenza recommended that I go take the Paul Brand's course on the insensate foot at the Leprosarium in Carville. And I did that I did it 3 times, but the first time I went was in 1981. And it was amazing. Total contact cast and all the mechanical engineers, just all the things. They talked about the basic science. I actually met Paul, was introduced to Paul Brand in 1975 when I was an intern here. I spent 2 months on the orthopedic service at Fort Sam as part of my residency here. And a guy named Reg Williams was the vice chair of orthopedics. So he took me to a meeting with him in Dallas. The title of it was The Foot, Child, and Adult. And it was still probably the most significant meeting I'd ever attended, because it was a who's who of all the orthopedists who are the expert leaders in anything on the foot and ankle. So Inman, Mann, Trott, Kalikian, Chianestris, Salter, and I'm probably leaving 4 or 5 more. Every guy that had some name behind something that we had to learn was at the meeting,
wow,
including Brand. And he explained why patients ulcerate from temperature increase and all of that. And by listening to him explain that, I spent 1 month at MCRD in San Diego. And every morning it would be 150, 200 guys in line to see the foot doctor at 6 in the morning. And that first day, so their foot would be swollen up, cellulitis. And Dr. Gilbert say, well, go see the patient. So I got, he has cellulitis. He needs to go to the hospital, need an IV, needs antibiotics. He said, they said, that's boot cellulitis. He need to go up there and put him on a wet to dry dressing and let it take place. Now, he never explained the why, but once I heard Paul Brand talk, then I understood why that happened. So that was my first encounter with Paul Brand. So I knew the name from that. And then once Valenza mentioned that, that's when I went and took the course. And I can remember he came to my meeting probably in the 90, 91 back there. Well, matter of fact, it had to be 90 because I have that picture that we took at our meeting, which is it's like a who's who of the diabetic foot. Everybody's on there, including Pecoraro, yep. Wagner, Pecoraro, Brand, Levin, Bolton, et cetera. They were all actually on that picture. It was like a 1990 meeting. And I think the next year was when Pecoraro died of cancer, because I think he died in 91. Mm-hmm. And then they named the lecture after him for the diabetic foot lecture at ADA.
Right. Another good friend of Dr. Paul Brand's was John Boswick, and you won the John Boswick Award here recently.
Right. Well, I don't know. I was on a couple of scientific advisory panels for Orthomagnia J&J prior to Grande being approved. And it was like a who's who of wound healing, most of the basic science, more research, but they had really no clinical experience in the diabetic foot. So I raised a lot of questions about different things they want to do and explain that. So I really believe, I know that I earned their respect by being there and knowing what my lane is and, what I was good at, et cetera, et cetera. And I think Kel Cohen, who won the award in 2005, probably had more to do with that than anybody, because I had never attended the award until Kel received the award in 2005. It was a meeting here in San Antonio. And at that particular meeting, the opening session was on the history of San Antonio's contribution to wound care. And they use the hyperbaric oxygen center at the Brooks Air Force Base, which is where Jefferson Davis was, the famous Burns Center at Brooke Army Medical Center, and that's the Institute for Surgical Research in Burns. And then we were the diabetic foot. So each one of us talked. So I had like 15 minutes to kind of talk about the wound risk, Armstrong Lavery, all that stuff that we had accomplished. Yeah. And so Kel Cohen received that award. And so after Elof Erickson, who's at Brigham's and Women's, he's a big plastic surgeon there, but he was a mentee under him. And a guy named Ola Tuyu out of Baylor, but he's one of the top guys in the country on wounds in pediatric patients.
Right.
So, but they came as his mentees, and that's when I was first exposed to that. And so I was in line to congratulate Kel, but it was a long line. I got bored, and I said, I'll catch him before the meeting's out. So late that afternoon, I ran up on him, and I congratulated him, and he mentioned that. He said, Larry, your ears must be burning. I said, what are you talking about, Kel? And he said, I was having dinner last night with some people, and I was telling them that you deserve to win this award. And then I guess 5-6 years later, I won the award. So he must have planted a seed, or somebody did within that, him and Eaglestein. Eaglestein was the chairman of at Miami forever. And I visited his, I spent a couple of days on the derm service there with him. I was in Miami for something, called him up after I met him through advanced tissue sciences and the product that advanced tissue sciences and
Dermagraft.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Dermagraft. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, Larry, because I remember those days in the early 90s. I was out of residency.
You were involved too at that level, same thing.
But, I didn't know as much, and I wasn't established. I was very young, and I got to meet John Boswick in Denver, and he and I used to go out for breakfast and talk about the current state of research. And it was John Boswick that introduced me to Paul Brand to start getting some NIH grants to develop new products for diabetic feet. So it's a small world, Larry, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I probably get into too much detail, but that was the foundation for learning and growth and all of that. And the other best part about all of that is by having conference, when you ask questions, that's how you create research, because if someone raised a question and there's not an answer, someone was taking notes, so we may have 5, 6, 7 questions every whatever we were talking about, because there was gaps in the literature. Somebody said, well, what does the literature say? What is this? What is that? And so if you're not having conference, then you're not going to, that's why each department, the basic science people, they have conferences, they bring people in all the time that's doing some new research, or someone has a new thing with the rat and mice, whatever it is. That's basically, how all of that works. Sure. And so to me, I was just learning and growing at a rapid rate. The only thing I didn't have was, I wished I had a PhD, Master in Clinical Investigation, where I had a little bit more foundation in research, et cetera, et cetera. And that's pretty basically what I tell students today is you need to be able to read the literature critically, just like you do doing surgery. And if you really want to be an academic, whatever you want to do as it relates to that in the pharmaceutical industry, if you can do that, then you can play with the big boys, whatever, but make sure that you learn to do that. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of going to a meeting and somebody summarizing it for you, and you don't know what the truth is. You need to be able to read that for yourself. And that's kind of what I try to share with all students.
Well, that's a great segue into talking about some more of your residents and fellows. Let me bring up another name for you, Dr. David Armstrong.
Yeah. Well, Dave has probably more energy than anybody I ever seen. Plus, Dave is a great writer, and and he really cares. I couldn't keep up with Dave because he would send you all these papers, and I was so busy. I mean, it's no way. So I just told him he needed to work with Lavery more. and they worked together. And Lavery was, he had that burning desire to do that. And I think he probably spent more time learning to do research. So Dave is a great writer and definitely a good clinician as well. But Lavery was the person that really wanted to do research. And so that happened because I was trying to get ACFAS to fund 2 fellows for 2 years that APMA and ACFAS, to me, made the mistakes of wanting you to get a degree. Now, the degree is important, but the mentorship and learning how to do stuff was more important than the degree, and they needed to be tied together. And that's kind of what I was interested in. I was on the ACFAS board from 89 to 95, and they were spending a whole lot of money on stuff that I just thought that, I can imagine had we invested in that now, where we would be. And I didn't necessarily feel like they need to train with me, but it was just so many people in the diabetes world I was meeting where you could, where they could really get the mentoring that was necessary, in that regard. But Lavery had we had a research meeting with ACFAS and probably around 93, 94, somewhere in there. And we had a nice little turnout. We had some top people at the Health Science Center came. Laura Wild had decent vision on all of that as well. But it was just difficult. And I'm not so sure that we've answered that question even today. All our fellowships is all about surgery. And that's okay. Are you doing a fellowship because you didn't get the training you should have gotten in the residency? And I'm not knocking that, right. But there's so much difference in that regard. I think that we need more people in fellowships in the medicine subspecialties, not surgery, so that we can go to all the medical schools and teach. Right. But if people that you still gonna do trying to do the 3 years of surgery that, what they call reconstructive foot and ankle. But to me, the things that's going to keep you there is being a comprehensive podiatrist, because you're going to always have that war with ortho, trauma, whatever. Right. I think you'll be able to do everything you train to do. I do believe that. But I do believe that bringing all those other things there in addition to that will solidify you, because in an academic environment, it's about learning. There's always politics. But I learned that if you teach, you're going to be able to do what you need to do. And if you work hard, everybody see that, and they're going to treat you as an equal. I believe that's what we attain over time and the respect. So what happened was, over the time of education, we probably had 30 people at the Health Science Center doing something every day. Wow. That's impact. And there are 165 MD medical schools, and we're not there doing that. There are about 42, 45 DO, and we have podiatric medical schools as part of that. But even when I got to Western, by me having conference and going to Arrowhead, Riverside, starting clinics, students rotating, I was doing more than the DOs were doing.
That's amazing. Doesn't make sense. Yeah, it totally makes sense. I love it. Yeah. They
were rotating students out there, but it wasn't like they had their faculty there mentoring them just like you would in a medical school, because in a medical school, they're part of the county hospital. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So I think the county hospital here probably spends $250 million a year to the Health Science Center. Right. Because they got to take care of those indigent patients. And so, but there's a lot of war going on now because we're not getting reimbursed as much. The county wants to hire their own physicians. UT want to do, so. But they got to figure out how to play in the sandbox together. And it can't be a zero-sum game, if you know what I mean. Oh, yeah. Share a little bit. Relationships and getting along seem to be the common theme in successful enterprises and advancing professions and advancing specialties. I agree. Let me bring up another name for you there, Larry. But I do think that I believe that every student should rotate within a medical school where they get to see what that process is about. Right. And that's consistency that they get to see it. Now, I always call it the will to be and do, the desire in the heart. And so everybody will talk a good game, but everybody don't have that same ambition, desire, to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so when you see that in someone that can teach and do that, then those are the people that's what medicine does. That guy become the chief resident, this guy's doing that. And they have all kind of, like every department will have a fellowship or something where a leadership thing where they can send their chief residents here and all of that. Like the Kellogg sponsors family medicine. They pick about 20, 25 people a year that each department of every medical school in the country can recommend somebody. But that's how they create the next generation of leaders, see.
Right.
And we haven't really done that in our profession where we share to bring that together, because some going to want to be in Arizona, some going to want to be here, some going to be there. But if we're doing that, everybody's going to have enough excellence where we can all work together from an educational perspective to help the profession. If that makes sense.
No, it makes
and sharing, not there's good, healthy competition. I don't mean that, but you still got to share. Yeah.
That doesn't just make sense. It makes common sense, Larry. That makes common sense. Let me bring up another name from the past for you, Dr. Gary Rothenberg.
Gary is, he's a brilliant guy, down to earth, sincere, really caring at the highest level. He's just amazing. He made me feel this big one time because I wanted to do a pan med ed on a patient. And he said, well, Dr. Harkless, did you ever ask Mr. Sanchez what he wanted? And I was parking at the bed guy. I'm a social determinants of health person.
Right.
And so I went in to see him, and we got in conversation. What I wanted to do was what Mr. Sanchez wanted. It was very interesting. And it's interesting. He was the first chief resident and to become a diabetes educator.
Right.
I don't know if you know that.
I do.
Yeah,
his son has diabetes, I believe.
But I was trying to require that they, I couldn't require it, but I told him that the diabetes educators would be like DRGs. I think that's the analogy that I utilize. DRGs came out, and that created a whole industry called home health care because you got the patients out of hospital and all of that. So with diabetes exploding, you got to get educated, et cetera. So it was interesting how that played out because his first job was going to be working with someone in Atlanta, and it fell through at the last minute. And he had sent out for privileges, and I had written him a letter and whatever. And do you know that the hospital hired him for more money as an educator than he was going to make with the podiatrist?
I did not know that story.
That's a true story, man. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, he was very successful at the VA in Miami. I worked with him a lot down there.
Oh, no. He was very, very good at all that. But the other thing is that to get work done, everybody thought they were doing my work, but I never took credit. Whoever did the most work was whose name was on the paper first, all that. And then if they did something, I would take them I want them to present. And I did that. And if whatever they did with me, they got to fly first class with me. Whatever I was doing, they got to do it. So one time, I think it's the ADA had a meeting in Florida every year, and it was in Aventura. I forgot the name of the place, but I took Rothenberg. So he loved that. And his famous quote was, "Make a lot of money, spend a lot of money."
There you go. There you go.
It's all good.
Okay.
But he wanted to do education. He told me that I came to Cleveland when he was a first-year student, and I was different. And he wanted to come check me out to see what I was doing. And once he came as a student, he knew he wanted to train there. That's basically what he said. And I think he saw the things that we kind of talked about.
Oh, absolutely. How about another one of your residents, Javier LaFontaine?
Javier, let's see. Javier had the vision of why you needed to be in a health science center as a student. He really understood that. He had been offered 2 programs, and that was before everybody got programs. It was in the mid-'90s, like 94, 95, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I told him I was going, I couldn't sign it, but I wanted him to come, So he turned down those programs, not knowing what was going to happen to come to San Antonio. But he really had the vision of of being in that environment and what that meant, et cetera. And he's a product of just hard work and just good attitude, spirit, all of that. Yeah.
You know, I knew Javier when he was a student and I was a resident. And
really?
Oh yeah, I've known Javier for a long time. I love working with him. I think he's going to do a phenomenal job down at Rio Grande Valley.
Yeah, no, he. I think he applied for the job where you were at Barry one time.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I think he didn't go because of the finance part in terms of salary, I think. But he was. That's when because he called me up to talk about that, and that's when I realized that he still wanted to do that. But when he came back, he was the first person to get the master's in clinical investigation at UT.
Right.
And then Shibuya followed him, and Shibuya is he's the editor for JFS now, Adjunct for Microsurgery. Right?
Yes.
Now Shibuya trained with Gerard Yu.
Okay.
And we invited you to our conference. Nobody from the podiatrist had ever been to my diabetic foot course.
Okay.
Now, they go around lecturing on that, but they had never been to the course. So Steinberg recommended we invite him, and we did. And I think he was so impressed, and then that's when I got to talk to him. And I invited him to the New Cardiovascular Horizons down in New Orleans with Craig Walker and David Ali. And that gave him another picture of the Institute putting on their conferences, all of that, and it was just another whole big vision of stuff that he saw. And he was an outstanding educator, Gerard Yu was. He was really good.
He was. I remember that conference back in the day. Here's another name for you, Dr. John Steinberg.
Well, John, we confused John. John came as a student, and I wanted him to train with us, but he didn't think he was going to get the surgical training. But he was... he really loved what he saw, all of that. And I got an award from the local affiliate of American Diabetes. And let's see, Satterfield was supposed to present me for whatever the award was, but she was sick, so she asked John. And what John said was that as a student, he knew that his training wouldn't be complete until he came and spent some time with us. And that's why he came, as a fellow. And then he stayed probably 5-6 years on the faculty. I think he left in 2003, something like that. Yeah. Right. So he was a really great guy, well-liked, a great teacher. But he came from, his grandfather was Marvin Steinberg, see. And that, when I told you about the Lupac thing, so it's amazing how all these things just so interconnect. Yeah, so I met Marvin at Lupac had a New Year's party, and he invited him. So I did get to meet him. So, yeah, very distinguished guy.
Oh, that's fabulous! It is amazing how small the field is.
But John said that everybody that came to train just bought into the learning, the passion for teaching, the patient volume we had, because I didn't have any money to pay anybody. Right. It was amazing that they stayed, and they stayed as long as they did. The university never invested one penny in it. Had they invested any money like they're doing today, I don't know where we wouldn't have been, if that makes sense. Even if I had a business person to interact directly with the pharmaceutical industry, just from an educational perspective, we would have been good. Now, the reasons that we weren't in the red were primarily because of the clinical trials and education, because we were still dealing with indigent patients and really weren't getting necessarily paid. When they started the TDI, we were supposed to get paid Medicare fees for taking care of the indigent patients, but they didn't tell us that we had to pay rent. So they was charging us rent at the TDI, and we were just drowning in red ink. And so we finally created a contract with them, which we had never had. And so that started to improve all of that. And then we had a primary care grant through HHS for, I think it was like 16 years, almost 17 years of competing renewal. We had to renew that every 3 years. And it paid for 4 resident salaries and about $50,000 to our faculty. So that was important because we were the first program within the medical school to get that funding, where the intern spent 2 months in the Rio Grande Valley where Javier, the school, is today. Wow. So there's a thing called the Area Health Education Center that's a part of the Health Resources and Service Administration, part of HHS. And so the dean of the medical school at that time was a PhD dean named Nelson. He was a brigadier general in the Army and ran the Academy of Health Sciences at Fort Sam. Okay. Loved podiatry. And so he really helped us a lot. And I think I served on about 8 searches for chairs of the department at the medical school. So he always talked, in any talk, he probably going to bring up podiatry some kind of way. And I'm just part of who he was. It was amazing. Yeah, Dr. Young.
Absolutely. How about another name, Ty Lu? He's soon to be president of ACFAS.
Yeah, Ty, he's just an amazing guy. He's really bright. He came as a student, probably a second-year student, and did research for a summer with Lavery, way back there, way before, he got to the 3rd or 4th year. Now, his family's, his father's a general surgeon, and I think he has a couple of his siblings that are doctors too. And so he ended up going into podiatry. Yeah. But Ty, I think he may have had a little chip on his shoulder because he, not an MD, pre-DPM. But I used to, tell him that he, know your stuff, man. You learn to respect. Don't worry. A degree ain't got nothing to do with it. And over time, it's amazing. Yeah. Now, he just finished up his master's in biostatistics. Okay. Just blows me away, man. So I don't know what he will not be able to do professionally over time with him and Van Pelt being at UT Southwestern. I don't know whether you know about UT Southwestern, but that's considered the Harvard of the Southwest of medical schools. So hopefully with the funding we have through the state GME fund, money is not an issue with starting the residencies. That's where ortho, politics, all of that will still play a role. But hopefully we can, if we can get that open, everything is in place to do that. Lavery was there, and then so they're in plastics and Van Pelt. I think there are 3 or 4 podiatrists in the orthopedic department, so they have, everything is there. And Parkland is a busier hospital than we have here.
Wow, that's incredible. Larry, all these leaders that have developed through the UT system are really a testimony to your vision for the profession and your education. My hat's off to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that I think they saw that here in the training, and and you don't have those negative things in you or worrying about am I as good as all of that. You learn that here. I used to tell the students that when we get about 50, 60 years to rotate for a month, some longer, that whatever you know today, you know more than anybody here at the Health Science Center about feet. We all are learning. So if you don't know something, it's okay. Go look it up. Say you don't know and go, learn and grow. And so I think everybody has to, that's the first level of satisfaction as a doctor, is that I know something, is the knowledge part. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then that continues to grow over time. But the last is 5 levels of satisfaction, but the last one is the satisfaction knowing that you help someone else. Absolutely. And it's the love of God in our heart to serve and help. Yeah. Yeah. You can make all the money, but if you ain't doing something in that regard, I think there's a void there. You really not contributing, and so that goes back to what kind of fruit are you producing? Yeah, in terms of that. And so I think that's the all the hard work of 30 years, that's what that was. But I think but that's just like you at home when you set rules and regulations and expectations for your kids, family, grandkids, nephews, whatever it is, that people will meet and exceed that if you're consistent in what you're doing. And you got to lead by example. You can't talk it, you have to do it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Larry, when you and I were talking the other day, I told you that maybe we'd have enough material for 3 episodes. I think we're going to have to come back and talk about your founding of 2 podiatric medical schools in an episode 3. Would you be amenable to doing that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, at this point then, we really covered the San Antonio years for sure. And I thank you for joining me. And oh my gosh, what a great discussion. And for all of our listeners out there, thank you for listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, we always love it when you're a subscriber. And Larry, until you and I talk again for part 3, cheers, everybody.